you. Thank you for having me this evening. When I was first contacted and asked to speak at your meeting and share what I know to be true about this issue of violence against women and intimate violence, I silently reacted the same way I always react when I am asked to speak. And that reaction is that my stomach immediately knots up. I feel the beginning of a little panic attack. And then the voices in my head start with, I can't do this, and I don't want to do this. But then I quickly remind myself why I do the work I do as an advocate for victims of rape. I remind myself, as a rape survivor, that the silence has to stop. And trust me, I am feeling very vulnerable and exposed as I speak. But I am no longer concerned with my discomfort, and I am no longer concerned with society's discomfort as I speak out. What I do care about is the overwhelming number of victims and survivors who are living with the deep wounds of intimate assault, rape, and those who, as we speak, are being harmed right now. I do want to mention that this is a fairly good-sized group, and when statistics are telling us that 1 in 6 women and 1 in 33 men have been raped, I have to assume I'm not the only survivor in this room, and believe me, I wish I was. Many survivors can experience triggers that really don't feel very good. So I just wanted to say, do whatever you need to do to be okay while I'm speaking, and if that means stepping out of the room for a few minutes, please do so. Whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. And I'm always happy to speak with anyone after the meeting or whenever. When I was 18 years old and away at school, I was the victim of rape. Up to that point in my life, my world was safe and comfortable and loving. I was a sweet teenager. I was a very innocent and very naive teenager. And I'd never been exposed to evil. But I had met this guy in the campus cafeteria, and whenever we would run into each other, we would chat for a little while. And on this one particular day, we were talking, and he was telling me about a party someone was having that coming weekend. And he said, you ought to think about going. And I said, yeah, I'll think about it. So that weekend came, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go to this party. Why not? I really didn't know anybody on campus. I didn't know any other students, so I thought it would be a good way to meet some other students. So I go. And when I walk into the house where the party was, and I walk into the living room, I see my new friend standing there, and 3 other guys that I had never seen before. No one else was in the house. But no alarm bells went off in my naive head. I guess I just thought I was early and others would be showing up very soon. It all happened very quickly, maybe within 10 minutes of being at that house. I will spare you and myself the ugly details, but I will tell you there was no party. 4 against 1 is not a fair fight, so I did what they told me to do. All the while, not really comprehending why or what was happening. It's like my brain and my thought process was unrecognizable, perhaps just shutting down as a defense mechanism. When they were done with me, they let me go. Just like that, they let me go. How did they know I would tell no one? Did they know my embarrassment and my humiliation and my degradation would keep me silent? How many times before me had they done this to someone and no one told? And how many times after me did they traumatize another innocent spirit and no one told? My shame has never been because I was the victim of rape. I always knew I didn't do anything to cause this rape. But my shame has been in my silence. I drove away from that house telling myself I was okay, everything was fine, it was all over, and I was fine. I mean, they let me go after all. They didn't beat me. There was no gun. There was no knife. I was fine. In my shock and in my denial and in my numbness, I could only repeat to myself that I was fine. And that's how I would survive. This was early 1971. We were a very silent society. Very few victims spoke of their assault, and very few victims reported to law enforcement. There were really no rape centers or crisis centers back then to speak of, though those really started popping up around the mid-70s. We kept silent, much like many victims still do today. It is estimated only about a third of rape victims will report to law enforcement these days. The day after the rape, I went back to work at my part-time job. The day after that, I went back to my classes. There was no hysterical crying, no drama. We don't do that. You know, all those typical images society has of a rape victim, the drama. No, we don't do that. We hide behind our shock and our denial, hoping no one recognizes our humiliation. I remember desperately wanting everything to be fine. I wanted everything to be the way it was before. I wanted to be the same me I was before. So I kept my denial going, and I started wearing what I call the mask. I was still going to be that young woman who laughed and smiled easily and often, and the mask would let me do that. I stayed in school maybe a couple more months, and then one day I just dropped all my classes, I quit my job, and I moved back home. I couldn't be there anymore. I thought being back home would keep the dark thoughts from haunting me every day, but it didn't. I eventually told a couple people about the rape. These were very brief conversations, and actually I wouldn't even call them conversations at all. It was very clear to me that most people way back then, and even now, have no idea what to do with this information. It's far too uncomfortable a topic to talk about, and so we don't. The silent messages I was receiving from society were saying, we don't know what to do with this, so we do nothing. So to protect myself and those around me, I went back into my silence for 30 years. I actually thought I was strong enough and capable enough to heal myself. I was going to be fine. I eventually went back to school. I got a good job. I got married, had 2 beautiful daughters. All the while wearing that mask, still thinking I could heal myself in my silence and in my denial. It took me 30 years of reoccurring sadness and depression and PTSD to finally realize I'd done a really crappy job of healing myself. It took me 30 years to realize there is no healing in our silence. I knew it was time to reach out and ask for help, and so I did. The healing, it came in bits and pieces, kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion. You think you're put back together again, you think you're whole again, and then it's like, oh wait, there's more. There's much more to work on. But I eventually got to a place where I was well into my healing. And I realized that I now needed to turn this very dark time of my life into something good and positive. I needed and wanted to be there for others, so they didn't have to be alone in their pain. 15 years ago, I became an advocate for victims of rape. And what I have found out while doing this work has been very disappointing, because I was hoping that my story of intimate violence was an old, outdated story, something that happened back in the day and not so much anymore. But that's not true. Victims today are telling me some version of my story over and over and over again. Society is still having a difficult time understanding the realities of intimate assault. And I've always said that society cannot understand because victims don't tell. But victims don't tell because society doesn't understand. So there's like this vicious cycle. It's true, victims and survivors are speaking out more and more these days. There seems to be a strength in numbers. But it isn't good enough anymore to simply say, I am a rape survivor. As survivors, we must now dig deep to find those very difficult words to then explain exactly what that means. I mean, what does it mean when we say I am a rape survivor? Because right now, it is very clear to me that even those seemingly intelligent and well-educated people just don't get it. When our justice system is giving a convicted rapist 3 months in jail, something is very wrong. The punishment should at least fit the crime. And I can promise you, a rape victim is enduring the painful, traumatic aftermath of rape for far longer than 3 months. Rape is never about sex. Never. Rape is never about sex. And I believe naming these crimes sex crimes or sexual assault, as we have done for generations, has been terribly misleading and has contributed to the perpetuation of the myths and the misconceptions and the victim blaming that goes on today. Rape is all about the power and control and the humiliation and degradation of another human being. And until we stop referring to rape as sexual assault, we as a society will continue to minimize the emotional trauma associated with these crimes. I promise you, no victim of an intimate assault will ever say he or she was having a sexual experience while being raped. We need to change our language. So when I tell you I am a rape survivor, I am telling you that my scars are from wounds that cut deep into my spirit and my soul, not my sex. I am telling you that that sacred spiritual core, that very special place, that intimate and personal place we all possess deep within, is our very essence, if you will. That's where my pain has settled, not my sex. My sense of self-worth, my willingness to trust, that sweet and hopeful way I view the world and myself, that was all mangled, not my sex. These are crimes that affect us in a very deeply intimate way. They are not sexual assaults, they are intimate assaults, and I wish our language would change. I've been asked to suggest some things that Rotary could do to make a difference in our community when it comes to this fight of violence against women. And of course, what always comes to mind is helping nonprofits with the funding of their programs, because we all know nonprofits lack adequate funding. But I believe the more important question is, what can we all do as individuals to make a difference in this fight? Are we making this very serious social issue our own, or are we leaving the fight for others to fight? Because I am pretty sure, whether you know it or not, someone close to you has been affected by this violence. Are we being mindful of the kind of role model we are to the little boys and young men in our lives? Are we teaching them about respect for others and having those very important conversations about clear consent? Are we leading by example? Are we empowering our little girls to use their voices and to know their worth? And yeah, are we teaching them about respect for others and clear consent? What are we doing to challenge our peers when we hear the occasional rape joke or disrespectful talk about females? Are we silently tolerating the age-old locker room talk because, you know, boys will be boys? Or do we speak up and try and change this tiresome culture of disrespect? What do we know about bystander intervention? Are we watching out for others in public, whether we're out partying or at a social event? If we see something, do we do something? Are we still focusing on what a victim was wearing? Or questioning how much were they drinking, or why they were with who they were with, or where they were? As if all these things were such powerful forces to cause a person to rape. When we blame the victim, we are dismissing the criminal behavior of the perpetrator, and it makes no sense. It's ignorant, uneducated thinking to blame a victim, and it makes no sense. We have made so much progress over the last 50 years, but we have a long ways to go. I am hopeful. 50 years ago, not many men would make this fight their own. Today they do. 50 years ago, the silence was deafening, and today we hear voices. My hope is that the victim blaming and the ignorance of the realities of intimate violence stops. My hope is that we don't shy away from this conversation, that we pay close attention. Because if we don't, we can expect the continuation of this violence with all its deep wounds to those who never deserve it. Your daughters, your sisters, your wives, your girlfriends, your moms, your sons, your brothers. Our future generations are counting on us to get this right. Thank you.